Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're bringing you a truly fascinating and honestly deeply unsettling explainer. We're looking at a story that plays out like a terrifying campfire thriller, but it actually has the heavy, inevitable mechanics of a classic tragedy. It's called The Devourer's Toll, the legend of Kaal Kotha. We're going to step out of our normal, everyday reality and journey into the shadowy, mist-covered hills of an ancestral Indian estate. We're talking about a very dark, incredibly atmospheric legend following a man named Vikram Thakur, and a family that is bound by an absolutely terrifying generational debt.
Okay, let's dive right into this. What is the true price of your family's success? We usually think of inheritance as, well, property, wealth, or maybe a thriving family business, right? But what if the prosperity your family enjoys was purchased with something far more sinister? What if the success you were born into required a horrific, hidden payment? This provocative question about generational wealth is the absolute core of the legend we're exploring today.
Section 1. The Cursed Inheritance.
So this brings us to the protagonist of our source material, Vikram Thakur. The narrative kicks off with Vikram making a really fateful journey. He's returning to his ancestral Indian estate, this grand traditional mansion known as a Haveli, tucked deep away in the remote hills. You can almost picture it, right? This eerie, fog-drenched setting as Vikram steps back into the home of his ancestors, totally unaware of the shadows lurking in the foundations. But man, things deteriorate fast. Vikram uncovers a horrific family legacy hidden right there within the estate. And look, this isn't your standard haunted house story with ghost rattling chains. No, it's way more insidious than that. This seemingly prosperous family harbors a dark, inescapable secret. Their wealth and standing are built on a foundation of absolute dread, and Vikram is just now realizing the terrifying trap he's walked back into.
Section 2. The Devourer of Time.
Now that we've set the stage and Vikram has realized the curse is real, we really need to understand the supernatural mechanics at play here. What exactly is this secret? What is this entity haunting the Thakur family? Well, the text gives us this very specific definition: Kaal Kotha, an ancient temporal demon known as the Devourer of Time to which a lineage is enslaved. I wanted to read that straight in a very clinical, structured tone, because the contrast between that dry definition and the actual horrifying reality of a temporal demon is just deeply unsettling. The family isn't just haunted, they are literally contractually enslaved to a creature that consumes time itself.
And this brilliantly illustrates the horrifying economics of the legend. On one side, we have worldly prosperity and success. This is the payoff, the grand Haveli, the elite status, the immense wealth. But then, look at the other side of the transaction. Years of lifespan. The Kaal Kotha grants all that worldly success, but in exchange, it demands the actual lifespan of its victims. It is a horrific, literal transaction. The currency being used to buy all this success, it's the very life force of the Thakur bloodline.
Section 3. A Father's Failed Escape.
Now you might be thinking, if I knew my family was enslaved to a temporal demon, I'd just run. And honestly, fair enough. That is exactly what Vikram's father attempted to do. However, his desperate flight could not cancel the supernatural obligation. He tried to outrun this massive supernatural debt, tried to put as much physical distance as possible between himself and that ancestral Haveli. But here's the catch. A contract of a supernatural entity that devours time, it's not bound by geography. This establishes a terrifying rule within the story's lore. The monster cannot be cheated. No matter what, the debt remains, waiting patiently.
The source text actually puts it perfectly with this quote. The supernatural toll eventually caught up with him. The debt always demands payment. Because the father failed to settle the score, because his attempt to flee was ultimately totally futile, that horrific burden was forcefully passed down to the next in line. It forced the terrifying reality of this generational curse squarely onto the shoulders of our protagonist, Vikram.
Let's move to this timeline and see exactly how this builds. It really lays out the terrifying, incredibly patient strategy of the Kaal Kotha. This thing plays a long, generational game. We start with Generation 1, the ancestors who made the initial doomed pact for prosperity in the first place. Then, Generation 2, the father's desperate failed flight, which leads directly to Generation 3, Vikram's fateful return to the Haveli to finally face the music. And looming ominously at the end, Generation 4, the next unfortunate heir. The demon doesn't rush, it simply waits.
Section 4. The Hidden Chamber.
So the story now rapidly accelerates toward its terrifying climax. Vikram realizes that running is impossible. The debt has come due, and he literally has no choice but to face the entity head-on if he wants to survive. You can feel the panic setting in here.
To survive, he has to find the Kaal Kotha. As defined for us, this is the hidden chamber where the entity must be confronted to settle the debt. I mean, just imagine the pure terror of Vikram's situation. He's trapped in this remote Haveli, and he's forced to descend into this dark, secret room, knowing exactly what is waiting for him in the shadows. He has to face the Kaal Kotha just to save himself from being consumed entirely.
The narrative walks us through a grim, desperate sequence of survival actions. Step 1. Enter the Kaal Kotha. Step 2. Confront the temporal demon. And Step 3, and this is by far the most horrifying part, perform a ritual sacrifice of vitality. You can't just battle this creature with swords or weapons. No, survival here requires a willing surrender of your own essence. The suspense is just suffocating as Vikram executes these steps.
Vikram must sacrifice his own youth to survive the encounter. To satisfy the temporal demon, he literally has to willingly let his own time be devoured. We can imagine the visceral, physical toll of this ritual, right? His vitality being literally consumed by the darkness. His body rapidly becoming withered and frail as years, decades maybe, are violently stripped away from him in a matter of moments.
So, the crucial point here is the aftermath. The source text describes the result of this horrific encounter, leaving him physically withered and broken. So, yes, Vikram survived the Kaal Kotha. He wasn't consumed entirely. But the cost? It was unfathomable. He emerges from that hidden chamber as an empty husk of the man he used to be. His youth is completely drained away just to pay a debt he didn't even accrue.
Section 5. The Unbroken Cycle. And this brings us to the incredibly bleak thematic resolution of the legend. This is definitely not one of those stories where the hero slays the monster and breaks the curse once and for all. The reality is much, much darker. Vikram is prematurely aged, completely withered by the sacrifice. But the worst part? This sinister cycle remains unbroken. The entity wasn't defeated, it was merely fed. It just retreats back into the shadows of the Haveli, where it awaits a future heir to satisfy its endless hunger. This vicious cycle of suffering simply resets. When we step back from the story, we see that this supernatural horror actually acts as a really powerful real-world allegory. The sins and debts of past generations inevitably demand payment from the present. The legend of the Kaal Kotha is this fascinating, structured exploration of generational trauma. It perfectly represents the hidden costs of prosperity and shows how the actions of our ancestors can place an inescapable, heavy toll on the lives of those who come after them.
Which leaves us with this final, chilling question to consider. What hidden, unresolved cycles might be waiting for you in your own lineage? Obviously, it probably isn't a temporal demon in a hidden chamber, but we all inherit legacies, both good and bad. I really hope this explainer has provided an engaging look at the mechanics of this dark legend and the profound themes it carries. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll leave you to think on that final question.